In Star Wars, the pendulum of civilization is constantly swinging between authoritarianism and democracy, the Sith and the Jedi. Republics fall, empires replace them, until they too collapse and some other form of government rises. Each one of these massive political changes are usually started and punctuated by galaxy-wide wars that cause great amounts of suffering and damage to the galactic citizenry and economy. Unfortunately, this is the natural state of the galaxy and most societies, no matter how small or large you scale them. And so the Star Wars universe can be a crude place to live, and thanks to its wide variety of different species and different cultures, different ways to live life, a lack of unity is always present, as is a lack of willingness to just work together and find commonalities. And I'm not sure if there'll ever be a perfect solution that can create long-lasting peace and stability, and that is because life in its most basic form seems to wither and die under such conditions. But in all of that chaos and all of that madness, there is one group of people that I think will survive no matter what, and ironically, our sponsor for today's video, ownersaber.com, kind of belongs in that group. Ownersaber.com is the premier provider of lightsabers in our galaxy. Obviously, due to the popularity of gunpowder-based weapons rather than energy-based weapons, lightsabers are kind of useless for self-defense because they don't really stop or deflect lead very well. But that doesn't mean lightsabers aren't badass and fun to swing around, and until the end of July, all of ownersaber.com's lightsabers are going to be 30% off with free shipping. Ownersaber.com is always releasing new lightsaber hilt designs like the Malgus, which is based off of Darth Malgus' lightsaber. He is one of the most feared Sith Lords during the Old Republic period and responsible for defoliating a good portion of Alderaan, and also the sacking of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, one of the greatest defeats in Jedi history. Now, I love this hilt design because even with the blade turned off, the dual hilt guards turn this lightsaber into a small entrenching tool, which can be used for some light earthwork or gardening should you decide to retire from a lifelong obsession with pillaging and destroying your enemies. Now, if you guys are interested in this blade, check out the description down below for more information, and you guys can use my promo code EWOK, that's all caps, for an additional $15 off. Thank you for your patience. On to the rest of the video. So in 5 BBY, shortly after the Battle of Jakku, a peace treaty was signed between the New Republic and Galactic Empire, marking the end of the Galactic Civil War. Now, one of the terms in this peace treaty that was agreed by both sides was an unprecedented disarmament of both of the military forces that partook in this civil war. The New Republic had passed the Military Disarmament Act shortly after the Battle of Endor. This was a pledge to reduce the size of the New Republic military to a token-sized force, and also it involved the redirection of resources from the federal military to local planetary defense forces. It was a bit cocky and premature to pass this act while the war was still going on. The New Republic was still engaged in heavy combat versus Imperial Remnant forces all across the galaxy, but Mon Mothma wanted to make it clear that the New Republic would not repeat the mistakes of the Old Republic and become another military dictatorship. And so instead, the New Republic would just make a new set of mistakes. The Galactic Empire, according to the terms of the treaty, was supposed to disband its military, destroy its academy training program and stormtrooper legions. Arm manufacturers and shipyards across the galaxy were banned from selling weapons and ships to the Imperial Remnants or any other associated factions, including the First Order, which sprung out of nowhere just decades later. The New Republic elites were an impressive lot. You had idealist career politicians like Mon Mothma, who truly stuck to her principles. Without her, I think the rebellion would have collapsed in those earlier years. Then you had individuals like Princess Leia, who was really just a warrior princess who fought for justice and the oppressed without thinking about her own safety. You had rebel heroes and fighters of all different types. But what the New Republic lacked in its elite circles were individuals with business experience and intimate knowledge of how the galactic economy worked. I mean, you did have guys like Lando and Han, but they were kind of criminals, so that doesn't count. Now, this might not seem like a big problem, especially in today's political environment, especially amongst the younger population who are now in college but have yet to set out into the harsh world themselves and are mostly being taught by well-meaning professors and teachers who also most likely have very little real-life experience in the business world. And so you do see this irrational hatred for people in the business world and for people who have wealth. But this general aversion to all business-minded people and folks who have accumulated wealth, especially in the liberal arts intellectual sphere, is problematic because it grossly stereotypes an entire group of people without truly understanding what the underlying problems our society faces and why there's inequality and corruption in the first place. In order to truly redistribute wealth and create a fairer society without, of course, destroying the entire economic system, which helps no one, you actually need successful capitalists to explain to you how to limit capitalism's more gross excesses. I mean, career politicians, lawyers, or legislators, activists who only understand the political fight, which is important, are severely lacking in this more practical knowledge area, especially if their staff is also filled up by people from academia. Education and life experience must come together to create a more perfect union. And good financial policy making usually requires people who are both educated but also have experience in running large organizations and managing budgets. And I know it sounds scary, especially when you've been taught all your life to not trust individuals who have wealth, but the reality is we have to open our minds and believe that some of these individuals do want to give back to society and create a much more stable environment for themselves and other people to operate in. The alternative is something like this. The New Republic would naively create a set of regulations and rules that might have seemed rational on paper, but would never really work in a real market economy. When the New Republic banned all companies from supplying the First Order with munitions, weapons, and ships, it didn't actually work. Companies like Blastech Corporation and Merson Munitions literally just created secret subsidiaries, including one known as Sonblast Corporation. I mean, it's not even that secret. They kept their names in this new company. And Sonblast Corporation would produce the F-11D blaster, which was clearly just an upgraded version of the infamous Stormtrooper E-11 for the First Order. Now, Sonblast Corporation was headquartered in the Unknown Region, which is outside of the Republic's jurisdiction, but it was extremely obvious to almost everyone that these were companies created by Blastech and Merson. And this was a complete slap in the face of the New Republic's authority. Now, some of you might be asking, why didn't the New Republic just punish Blastech and Merson, or at least the portions of this company that operated in the New Republic? Well, we don't have a clear answer because that part of the canon isn't really fleshed out that much, but all we have to do is take a look at the Clone Wars period for a more concrete answer. When people saw the Clone Wars TV show, a lot of fans were confused why the Neimoidians from the Trade Federation were allowed to have representation in the Republic's Senate when they were clearly a huge part of the Separatist Alliance's war effort. I mean, Viceroy Newt Gunray, who technically became a fugitive in the Republic and on his home planet of Cato Neimoidia, was still clearly using the Trade Federation's resources for the Civil War. I mean, just look at the blockade and invasion in Naboo. The Trade Federation droid army back then looks exactly like the one the Confederacy and Penn systems would field. Then you have organizations like the Techno Union, which also had representation in the Galactic Senate, despite the fact that its foreman, Wat Tambor, was clearly leading Separatist forces on Ryloth and looting the planet. Techno Union subsidiaries were also clearly providing weapons to both sides of the conflict. Bactoid Armor Workshop and Bactoid Combat Automata was one of the largest subsidiaries in this organization and was responsible for most of the droid army's battle droids and vehicles. Another subsidiary of Techno Union was Quadrave Yards. They were responsible for building all of the major starships for the Republic. Then you have Blastech Industries, which was another Techno Union subsidiary. They built both the SE-14 pistol, which is used by the Separatist Alliance, and most of the small arms used by the Grand Army of the Republic. The Techno Union was one of the largest manufacturing conglomerates in the galaxy. And this is why it was allowed to basically supply both sides. The Republic and the Confederacy didn't want to alienate this organization by imposing restrictions on weapons sales. While both the Republic and Confederacy were aware of the Techno Union's double dipping, they couldn't really ban the Techno Union for supplying their enemies, and that's because it would cut their own governments and militaries off from weapons that they sorely needed and give the other side a huge advantage. Any attempt to nationalize these companies or force them to do the bidding of their government would be very difficult to achieve, and that is because of the free trade zone that was set up in the Outer Rim in the years leading up to the Clone Wars. Many of the Techno Union's factories were located in Confederacy space and just couldn't be accessed by Republic forces. This is the unfortunate truth that a lot of libertarians try to ignore. When you have a very weak central government, it creates a vacuum of power that can easily be taken over by mega conglomerates. This is a problem we have in the United States all the time. It used to be any type of company that held a monopoly of a certain size in any industry could be sued for breaching competition laws. But now, As long as a company like Amazon proves that they benefit the consumer through their monopoly, they're allowed to continue to exist. And while Amazon did provide low-cost goods in the past, their model no longer seems to work as well and has led to increasingly expensive and shitty products. And in the wake of their destructive growth lies a graveyard of small businesses that used to make up every downtown main street in America. These businesses used to be one of the quickest ways for Americans to reach the middle class, and then some. Now, obviously, the alternative, which is a very big and strong central government that nationalizes a lot of private industries and resources, also not a good idea. And, legislation that is extremely critical at trying to control how businesses operate will lead to the same type of economic problems and capital flight you'll see with a weak central government. While public organizations are important in certain sectors and services, they can't fully replace or compete with their private counterparts without huge amounts of subsidies and regulation. To find balance in the middle is the key to creating a stable society. Extreme political and economic policies almost never work because they fail to understand that there is no perfect solution to the chaos that is sentient life. Only through compromise and balance can we create better outcomes for everyone involved. And very few planets in the Star Wars galaxy are capable of finding that balance, and usually the ones that do are smaller planets with less levels of governance and bureaucracy. When you have a galaxy-wide government with different planets, different economics and technological levels, finding that sort of balance that will work for everyone is much harder to achieve. And in the case of Star Wars, a weak central government directly led to several arms manufacturers to grow to such a size that they were no longer able to be stopped by the central government. And so no matter who wins the next war, even if it means the destruction of half of the galaxy, like cockroaches, these enterprising arms dealers will continue to find a way to survive and continue to find a product that people are going to want to have, whether it's a blaster or just a rock that's tied to a stick. Ironically, Rian Johnson during The Last Jedi kind of got it right. Arms dealers are, from a certain point of view, complete scumbags. Yes, the way he portrayed this in the film was just jarring. There was very little lead up, and his criticism of one of the oldest professions in the galaxy just came out of nowhere, and the execution was super cringy. But yeah, if there's one industry that will always be a necessary evil, it's the arms trade. And so as repulsive as DJ might seem here in his little discussion with Finn and Rose, he does speak an uneasy truth.
As an arms dealer, made his bank selling weapons to the bad guys. Oh. I'm the good. Let me learn you something big. It's all a machine, partner. Live free, don't join.
The only thing that DJ gets wrong is his cynicism, in my humble opinion. In my videos, I try to explain the various political, economic, and social systems that operate in the Star Wars galaxy. And oftentimes I try to connect this to the real world because that is what science fiction ultimately is all about. It's a mirror of our society. It's designed to make us think and become better people. And it's very common for people, when they learn about the depravity and extremes within our society, to be completely turned off by the whole situation. It's common for us to become more cynical. We start thinking that our individual choice doesn't matter because there will always be someone else who is more willing to take advantage to exploit the system. Others will be so overwhelmed by the complexity of our world that they'll try to seek simple truths, which almost always are lies. These simple truths are disguised as political ideologies or religious ideologies, and they're a lie because they oftentimes pretend to offer the truth to questions that have no true answer. Like, what is the perfect political system? There is none. What is the meaning of life? There's a lot of different meanings. The reality is, the more you understand our world, and not just the Star Wars galaxy, it's natural to become more and more confused. And that's completely fine because there's this false perception that smart and wise individuals have all of the answers. It's actually the opposite. The most intelligent and wise individuals are oftentimes the most confused and scared individuals at the same time. And that's because the more you learn, the more doors you unlock, and the more you realize you don't know. What makes a person truly wise is their courage, their ability to deal with the fact that it's better to continue to seek the truth for the rest of your life and be okay with never finding a concrete answer to all your questions rather than forcing a simplified explanation to a complicated problem. Now, in the comment section for this video, and also other videos I do, you'll see people say stuff like, liberals are to blame, conservatives are to blame, blah, 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 blah. And these are emotional outbursts. These outbursts come from a place of fear because it's hard to know what exactly is going on. And so people seek to find definitive answers. And I am also very guilty of this. I'm a very emotional person, and I recognize this. And I think the only thing we can really do as human beings is continue to try and be our best. We all have to accept that we're all works in progress and that we don't have all of the answers. We all have to charge with courage into the unknown, with humility. We all need to have less opinions and more questions, probably. And this is so that when it's time to make a decision, we are more open to compromise, so that we don't allow our emotions to cloud our judgment. So many people today attach their political views with who they are as people when they haven't even really thought out what their political views are. And in today's media environment where we're bombarded with information from every direction, I think the only way we can survive as a species is to adopt this more rational approach to what we understand and what we don't.